Your podcast episodes are too long and this is hurting your business.
That's probably a cue for you to lean away from speaking into some of those topics and maybe test a separate type of content pillar.
If those two things are not world class, I guarantee you they will not click. They will go and click the video of your competitor.
They're not actually considering the end user, and this is where most people actually go wrong with this.
Welcome, legends, to Podcast Marketing Secrets,
where we share all of the tactics and strategies from the #1 podcasting agency
on how to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful, high-converting podcast.
Let's take your business and content to the next level.
Welcome back to another episode of Pod Marketing Secrets. Today, we are covering 5 big mistakes that you're currently making that are preventing your podcast from growing and monetizing accordingly. So you might be leaving a lot of money on the table for your business if you don't get these 5 things right. And mistake number 1.
So undoubtedly, this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when podcasting, which is not making content that appeals to their target market or their ideal listener. You have to consider the experience and the information that you're providing through your podcast and ensuring that it's actually something that is of interest and of value to those that are listening. And this is a huge mistake that we see all the time. Often people might want to just speak into interest areas for themselves, but they're not actually considering the end user. And this is where most people actually go wrong with this. So that's probably one of the biggest ones in my opinion.
Absolutely. And this is crucial for you to understand that all your content should be around your dream customer. Everything you talked about should be in the wavelength of how does this serve them? How does this help them? How does this provide value to them? And obviously should also be connected to your offers, backend services, products, and anything you offer to your specific market that solves their problems and get them a desired outcome. So yes, you can talk about other things that are also different layers to you so that they also get to know you in a deeper way. However, do it with intention. Anytime you bring a story or something that is outside of what you do and your field of expertise, there has to be a reason of why you're doing it. There has to be some level of connection to it. Don't just start talking about the grocery shopping you did yesterday if you're trying to get consulting clients to scale a business.
100%. That actually leads us on to another massive mistake that we see all the time in podcasting, which is changing your strategy too much.
Absolutely. You have to be extremely careful with this. And this is why it's so important to hit the ground running with the right strategy, because ultimately the results you're going to see are going to come from just staying consistent to the one thing. If you start getting shiny object syndrome or just talking about a bunch of stuff that, as I said before, are not connected to your field of expertise, you're going to get people confused, that you won't be known for something specifically in your industry. You will be known as this person that talks about all these random different topics. So in their mind, they will be confused on how to perceive you. And it's almost impossible to be known for something if you are being confused, if your message is not absolutely clear.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why it's so important though, when you're thinking about doing a podcast, you need to set the foundation strong, which is, as we're saying, that strategy. Now, it is also important to note that your strategy is not set in stone. We're not saying that you have to maintain the same strategy throughout the course of your podcasting. In fact, it should change and adapt, but it should be based on data. It shouldn't be based on feeling. And this is where most people go wrong, which is changing the strategy that you put together initially based on feelings or anecdotal data, not true hard facts. So an example of this might be, look, if you've tested certain episodes that were a part of a content pillar that you had planned, and you can clearly see across the board that that data from those episodes is underperforming, implying that it's not providing value to your listeners, then that's probably a cue for you to lean away from speaking into some of those topics and maybe test a separate type of content pillar. So I guess moral of the story here is you absolutely do not want to be changing your strategy on a whim. And in fact, that should be an incredibly considered decision if you were ever going to look at changing strategies. There are some certain instances where you might want to change your strategy. However, it's rare.
It is extremely rare that that's the best course of action. There has to be a really strong reason of why you want to completely change strategies. Is absolutely fine to be constantly evolving. That's what it should be happening, because you're never the same. Your business is never the same. Your offers are in constant evolution as well in order to serve your market better. So your content should be in alignment with that. And because we have been in the game for so long, we have seen many businesses and podcasts and content marketing strategies completely fail because they couldn't stick to the one thing. And on the same token, we have seen other cases where the right move was to completely switch strategies, and then results simply skyrocketed because we switched to a better vehicle and a different market. But again, this is something that you have to assess accordingly. What's mistake number 3?
Mistake number 3 in podcasting is making terrible titles and thumbnails. Gosh, this is a massive one, honestly, and this is something that is so important. We always say here that your title, your thumbnail, and your first minute or so of your episode, all of those 3 things together are making a promise to your audience. And if they are not aligned, you are going to see terrible results. That's end of story. There's not really much coming back if you screw up your title, thumbnail, and first minute of your podcast, especially when it relates to platforms like YouTube. Your thumbnail game has to be on point. And there are people that all they do is design YouTube thumbnails. Just consider that. You're out here competing with graphic designers whose job it is day in, day out to just optimize YouTube thumbnails. That's actually how important they are, specifically on YouTube. Now, Spotify has also just introduced the use of thumbnails, yet to be seen the level of impact that that plays in terms of the data and performance of podcasts on those platforms, as it's a newer feature, but that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. So though on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your title is increasingly important because it's not always at this point in time accompanied with your thumbnail. So those 2 things combined are a massive mistake that most podcasters actually make.
When you make a new episode, the very first thing that's going to happen for your dream listener to decide if they want to consume or not this information will be looking at the title and the thumbnail. If those 2 things are not world-class and playing the game, understanding psychology, understanding at a deep level your dream customer, your market, the problems they have, the desired outcomes that they're looking for, I guarantee you they will not click. They will go and click the video of your competitor. That's how important that is. And again, as Cal mentioned, that has to be in full relation with the initial section or hook of the video, because otherwise they will also drop off. But the combination of the YouTube title and thumbnail creates the metric of CTR, or click-through rate. This will heavily determine how much YouTube will also push your podcast and content to a bigger audience. So if you don't get these 2 things right, not only your dream customer will not click, but also YouTube will not promote your content, so you will be stunned when it comes to growth on the platform. So remember, this is a sale. that you're doing to the market and to your potential customers, or hey, you should totally listen to this thing, and it's all related and packaged with your thumbnail and title. And side note, if you don't have a social media manager that understands at a deep level these two things, you will not win. Your growth will be heavily limited. These are very specific skills that not any social media manager has. It has to be trained. The person that is behind your personal brand, your content strategy, needs to master these two skills.
100%. And actually, just one final point on that as well is that when it comes to YouTube, I often find big corporate brands not wanting to play the game. It's very important for your designers to understand that there is a difference between your corporate designs, branding, and what is effective on YouTube. Now, given that we're speaking a bit about metrics, another one of the biggest mistakes we see in podcasting is actually making episodes that are too long. What? You might be thinking to yourself, how does that make sense? Well, the amount of time that somebody listens to your podcast actually also can impact how a platform will promote your podcast. What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, if we take YouTube, one very important metric on there is your average view duration. What that means is how long somebody is actually listening to your episode for. Often what you'll find, and if you go onto your back-end analytics, you'll see a nice little chart like this, okay? But you'll see that there are spikes and there's places where people drop off. The longer an episode is, unless you are an incredible communicator or you have a celebrity status guest, there is a higher likelihood that your audience might not stay for as long, therefore decreasing your average view duration. If I was to relate that metric to your podcasting platforms, we'd be talking about average consumption, but it essentially works in the same way. So I guess the moral of the story here is that when you're considering the length of your podcasting episodes, if you don't feel as if you have enough value to provide for a 30-minute podcast, decrease the length of your podcast. It is totally fine. And in fact, leaders in the industry, Alex Hormozi, I've seen do bite-sized 5-minute podcasts, and it just packs an incredible punch. People come, they get the value, and they can go on with their day. And what's also so important to understand about the length of your episode is aligning it directly to, again, your ideal avatars, your listeners. Alex Hormozi, for instance, knows that his listeners are time-poor, high-level entrepreneurs, yet they still want to get some value out of him. How could they do that? Through a 5-minute podcast episode. It requires no longer than that in order to deliver value.
Let me make sure we land the plane here. Your podcast episodes are too long, and this is hurting your business. Longer doesn't mean better. Make sure that what you're delivering is just packed with value. If that means that you make a 10-minute episode or 5-minute episode, as long as you make sure that they will consume more of it, ultimately, that will help you grow faster. The platforms as well, when you think of them as a business, guess what? They want people consuming content. They want people staying within the platform. So if your content is getting too boring and it's just making them close the app or go do something else, they're not gonna reward that. Simple as that. So how do you combat that? Make great content, make it shorter, make it punchier, make it packed with value, and ultimately the platform will want to reward you for it because you're helping them retain their viewers and the people that consume the platform. And therefore, if people consume more of you, they will be more of a raving fan. You will be building deeper relationships, and therefore they will be way more likely to buy your offers in the back end. What's the last mistake?
The last mistake as it comes to podcasting is not standing up for anything. Not having an opinion, being grey, being middle of the pack, whatever you want to call it, that never got anybody anywhere. The reality is, that there's a lot of content out there in the market, and your biggest point of difference is you, your values and your beliefs. So anybody who is sitting on the fence, is wishy-washy, is not standing up for anything through their podcast and through their content is really not going to stand out.
You might not believe this, but it is a really good indication of things working for your content strategy if you get people to disagree with you. If everyone is on the opposite end, you might want to reconsider how you're framing and saying things. The idea is that you don't stay neutral. So as long as you have people that are getting on your side, and then that will create as well an opposite end to it that doesn't agree with you, that's actually really good, because that means that now you're standing up for something. Now you're choosing a side. You're not staying in the middle where most people are. Most people are just too scared to stand out. They don't want to have someone that is not agreeing with what they have to say. And guess what? Those people will never be able to beat the person that is willing to just go against the grain, but as a result of that, he also gets die-hard fans that also agreed with their point, and therefore will be very likely to buy their offers in the back end. So I hope you got a lot of value from today's episode. Where can they find us, Cal?
Awesome. You can find us at Vibez Creative on all social media platforms, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us on Podcast Marketing Secrets. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support us in continuing to deliver this content to you is by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Now, if you're keen to connect with us, we are at Vibez Creative on all your other social media platforms. Please send us your questions, engage with us, let us know what you want to hear about next on the podcast, and we'll be sure to create content around that.
And if you're interested in partnering with us for the highest level of support for you to be able to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful podcast for your business or your personal brand, we offer different levels of support, starting from our services, one-on-one coaching, as well as our completely done-for-you system. So if you're interested in finding out more, book a call with our team down in the description below.